welcome back to our workshop on winning hearts, making disciples in East Asia. I'm Greg Whitsitt.
And I'm Amy.
And this is our second episode in the first section of the series, which is talking about sizing up our mission. And at this time, we're going to take a look at how do we measure success and what is God's way of measuring success in our mission work.
According to the world, there's many ways to measure success, and it depends on what your career is, right? On how you would measure success. So I have just a few questions for you. How would a doctor measure success? Yes, a doctor would measure his success based on how healthy his patients are, how healthy the community is, right? What about a car salesman? How would a car salesman measure success? What do you think? Yes, Ebenezer.
Car salesman will measure his or her success by the number of cars sold.
The number of cars. So it's the total at the end of the year, right? How much money did I make selling cars?
And maybe if he's driving a nice car of his own, right? You know, he's making some good money.
Or opening a new branch on the other side of town. Yes, excellent. So what about a teacher? How would a teacher measure his or her success? Yes, Jonas. By the success of the students.
For example, if the students become a pastor, if the students become a gospel worker, if the students become a professor.
Okay, so based on the success of the students, how successful they are in life, maybe if they're younger, how well they're able to read and to do their math, so how well they're passing their tests. Many ways that actually a teacher can measure their success, and it's based on the success of the student in this case. What about a gospel worker? How would you measure success of a gospel worker?
Good question. Any ideas?
Shadid.
The amount of disciples that they make.
Okay.
Because I think we make the mistake of measuring success by baptisms, but that doesn't really show if they've really been successful or not.
Interesting that you say that.
Good answer. Ebenezer, you had an idea.
Going to say that because the number of disciples you make, they will also go out and make more disciples. You know, and so we need to make good disciples so that they will also go and make more disciples, and then there will be a rippling, you know, like that.
Right, replicating.
I think, Amy, we have A students here.
I think
I'm
so.
hearing some good answers on this.
That's right. You're both onto something. We're going to look now. Often what we do in our churches is we measure baptisms. How many people did you baptize after your latest evangelistic series? Or how many members, new members do you have in your congregation this year? We measure a pastor's success often on how many baptisms he has or she has. Sometimes we even measure the success of a conference president on how many churches are there and how many new churches. We also measure how well are those churches growing. Are they swelling up? Are they getting new members? So we're looking at these number things, the statistics. But you know, sometimes we also will measure based on people's knowledge. How well do they know the Bible? When you take your Pathfinder class to a Bible Bowl, do they get the blue ribbon? If they do, you must be a very successful Pathfinder leader, right? How many Bible verses, memory verses did your primary class memorize? We're measuring Bible knowledge. Finally, the one that our treasurers like the most, how faithful are our members in paying their tithes and offerings? These are good things to measure, and we need to measure them. We're being asked to be stewards, and this is how we measure how well we're doing with stewardship. But how do we measure? Is this really the only way that we can measure? Is there any better way?
This is, you know, when you're a worker out in the field, you often think, well, what is success? How am I going to be successful? What do I want to do as a pastor? Yes, there may be some objectives and things that the local field, the conference or mission would like you to do, but really you have to figure out what you're going to do. Whether you're a global mission pioneer, a pastor, or a local member, what does success look like? And so that's what we want to look at. But the key question is, what about God? How does He see success? And what is His goal and mission? So let's take a look at that one there, starting first. Turn in your Bibles to Matthew chapter 24 and verse 14. And I'd like one of you to read that for us. Does someone have that as we're turning? Okay, Hockey, let's all turn there. Matthew 24, verse 14. And Hockey, when you're ready, please go ahead.
Okay. Matthew 24:14. And this gospel of the kingdom will be preached in all the world as a witness to all the nations. And then the end will come.
Okay, so here's the ultimate prophecy, right? There are many things that will happen. We know Matthew 24 is all talking about Christ's return, but the greatest sign is that the gospel has been preached where? Into all the nations, exactly. Then the end will come. And so this is obviously a goal God has. And some of you I know are students of the biblical language of Greek. You know the background that this word all nations, or this phrase, is panta ta ethne. And that word ethne is where we get the word race or ethnicity from in English. So that's one thing that we know is very important. But also there's another text, Revelation 14, verse 6. Let's take a look at that Bible text. And does someone have, Shadid, thank you. Can you read that for us when we get there?
Yes. Revelation 14, verse 6. Then I saw another angel flying in the midst of heaven, having the everlasting gospel to preach to those who dwell on earth, to every nation, kindred, tongue, and people.
Okay, excellent. So this we know is an important message at the end of time. The three angels' messages is what we're reading here, right? But again, there's that emphasis of reaching all nations, panta ta ethne. And let's just look at each of these words. First, the word nation is ethnos, which, like we just saw, is a race. Kindred is the phulain, or phylane, actually, the tribe. Tongue, of course, is glosson. It's the language, where we get glossolalia from, or glossary in English. And then the last one, people, is a laon, or the populace. Okay, so we find this in several places, don't we, in the New Testament, where there's an emphasis on every nation, kindred, tongue, and people, or some order, variation of that order. So it's very clear that if we want to be successful, it's not enough to baptize and to share the gospel with neighbors, but we need to keep track of where are all of these peoples, and have we reached them all? In our last episode, we talked about that there are many Buddhist people groups. Remember, we said there's 238, and maybe you can count different ways, but this is one of the numbers that's been proposed. Well, how are we doing on those 238? Well, some have never heard the gospel. There's no Bible even in their language. So obviously there's some nations, some ethnes, some peoples that are left unreached.
Just to define people group for us, some people don't understand. A people group actually is a distinct group of people, typically defined as the largest group of people in which the gospel can spread. It can spread as a church planting movement. It's kind of a self-contained. You have people within that people group who can reach others in that people group. And so a people group is actually identified often by language, sometimes by region, by religion. You can define people groups in many, many ways.
I think we have some examples here, right?
We do. The first example actually is of languages, two different languages, Japanese and Thai. Really can't communicate with each other unless they use sign language. They're very different people groups with different culture, different background, different languages is how we're identifying them here. But let's look at the Thai. Even within Thai, you have Thai Buddhists and you have Thai Muslims, and you really can't plant a church between those two or call them as one group and try to plant a church within them, because their religious background is so different. It makes them very distinct from each other. And so they are individually different people groups. Finally, if we look even within Thai Buddhists, even within Thailand, there's different regions. So you have the Isan, northeast, you have the central, you have the southern, and they are distinct. They have a little dialect difference. Their backgrounds are a little bit different. Central Thai tend to be more urban, Isan Thai tend to be more rural, and so we can actually define these as separate people groups. There's been some studies. Are any of you familiar with the Joshua Project? It's a website that
Excellent
actually,
resource, yeah.
yes, they actually focus on counting all of the people groups in the world and identifying which ones are Christian, which ones are not, and then they kind of have I think it's kind of a red, yellow, green kind of a system where those that are completely unreached, those that are completely reached, and then those that are maybe kind of, we're not really sure, kind of reached. They have identified that in the world there are over 16,000 people groups, distinct people with either a distinct language, a distinct religion, something that identifies them as a distinct people from those around them.
Which is a barrier so that the gospel doesn't
Right.
flow smoothly from one part of that society to another. So we have to help do cross-cultural ministry to reach the rest of that group. Yeah.
And of those 16,000, a little more than 6,500, 6,693 of them, so 40% of these people groups are considered unreached. And this is just Christianity. This isn't Adventism. This is within Christianity. That's almost 7,000 are unreached still today.
So where do all these people groups come from? What do you think? We know the story, don't we? At least how the languages began. Let's look at Genesis chapter 11, and we'll read verse 1 and 2, and then verse 4. And does someone have that? Ebenezer, would you read that for us, please?
Genesis 11, 1 and 2 and 4. Now the whole earth had one language and one speech. And it came to pass, as they journeyed from the east, that they found a plain in the land of Shinar. And they dwelt there. And they said, Come, let us build ourselves a city and a tower whose top is in the heavens. Let us make a name for ourselves, lest we be scattered abroad over the face of the whole earth.
Okay, so amazing. We have this people creating a name for themselves, and this is a challenge, right? It's going to, immediately after the flood, it's going to cause a problem with God's mission to save this world. And so we find in the following verses, verses 6 through 8, what God's response is. Who has that verse for us? Ooh, please.
Genesis 11, 6 to 8. And the Lord said, Indeed, the people are one, and they all have one language. And this is what they begin to do. Come, let us go down and there confuse their language, that they may not understand one another's speech. So the Lord scattered them abroad from there over the face of all the earth, and they ceased building the city.
Okay. It's an amazing story, right? How we don't know what languages must have started, but linguists say that actually there are families of languages, so it's possible that those families started as one at the Tower of Babel and then further diversified with dialects and so forth, and so we had many, and as we saw from the Joshua Project.net website, they have statistics there that there are close to 17,000 different people groups, with most of them having their own unique languages. Incredible. But it's quite a challenge, isn't it? What I find very interesting is that when you're reading Genesis, you see the problem in Genesis 11, and it's the very next chapter that shows God's heart and how He relates to the problem. Because who created the language? Who created the confusion? Who made it? God made the confusion. God's the one that split up the languages. So is He just like trying to punish people and destroy, get rid of them? So after the flood, people might be confused about God's character. No, actually, God has a mission to each one, but He's trying to save us from ourselves, to divide us, so then He can come along later with mission. So let's look at Genesis chapter 12 and verses 1 to 3. Who has that text? Joyce.
Genesis chapter 12, verses 1 to 3. Now the Lord had said to Abram, Get out of your country, from your family and from your father's house, to a land that I will show you. I will make you a great nation. I will bless you and make your name great, and you shall be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and I will curse him who curses you. And in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed.
So, what we see here, right, Amy, is that there is a calling of Abraham to leave, to separate himself, and then what happens?
He's given a mission.
And what is that mission, Amy?
Go back. Love these people. Share my message with these people.
Okay, and what is the word that was used here? Was it nations? What was the word what we just read, Joyce, at the end?
The earth.
So you
The
will bless,
families.
I will bless those who bless you, I'll curse those who curse you, and in you all the
Families of the earth.
families. All the families. Which is bigger, a family or a nation?
Nation.
Except that scholars have suggested that this word families may refer to peoples, to nations, but even if we get confused, we can at least say that obviously God wants to make sure everyone has a chance. That's important. And that is exactly following the story of the Tower of Babel, is God's mission to reach all the people who've just been scattered. Amazing. And of course, we had just read earlier about the three angels' messages. That is, the everlasting gospel is to be proclaimed to every nation, kindred, tongue, and people. Amy, would you share about this here?
Yes, on our website, for those of you who are prayer warriors or who have churches who would like to pray for these unreached people groups, we have taken all the unreached Buddhist majority people groups from the Joshua Project, and we have created prayer cards for each one of them. It lists the population, it lists that they are majority Buddhist, it gives the percentage of how many evangelical Christians there are in that country, and if we have
that people group.
in that people group, and if there's any Adventist statistics, we include that as well. List their language, whether they have the Bible, and then where they're located, so you could actually find them on the map. On the back side of the card, there's a checklist, so you can actually pray for 30 days for each of these individual people groups. So I would encourage you to go to our website, cear.globalmissioncenters.org. You can download these for free, print them out. They're color-coded also for each division. There are unreached people groups in 4 divisions that we've identified. So South Asia Division, SUD, North Asia Pacific, NSD, South Asia Pacific, SSD, and Euro-Asia Division as well. So 4 divisions with prayer cards on the specific people group, majority Buddhist people groups in those divisions that you can be praying for.
And what we've done is that these people groups, you know, the borders of modern countries today often will break up a people group. And so Joshua Project actually counts them as separate people groups because sometimes the political boundary is too great a boundary for the gospel to easily flow from one country to the next. So we have about 600 cards because many of these people groups cross different countries. So you could look for your country or a country that you have a burden for, and you can download them for our website and print them off and use them with your Sabbath school or church or just your private devotions and pray for these people. Let me just mention something. If people groups are so important to God, should we be counting how many we've reached? Should we be tracking how many are left unreached? I'm thankful that the Joshua Project has actually taken the time to assess that for Christianity, but we as a church need to start assessing that too. The good news is I know that the Department of Adventist Mission with the GC are trying to start that process with the new membership software, and so I think we're moving in that direction. But in your local fields, make sure that you make this a priority because obviously it's a priority to God. So God's goal is to reach every people group on earth. But God has a second goal as well. And let's take a quick look at that. I think we have a few minutes left. In Matthew 28, we read in our last episode a text. Did we have someone reading that? Or are we? No. Okay, we've already looked at that. We have it here on the screen. When I see Matthew 28, I see a sandwich. Do you see a sandwich when you read Matthew 28, the Gospel Commission there? Most people don't. Maybe it's because I'm American and I love sandwiches. but I see a sandwich. And what I find there is that the Gospel Commission begins and it ends with Jesus. It's like the bread of the sandwich. It begins, all authority has been given to me in heaven and on earth. So Jesus identifies and establishes that he has authority to delegate to us in our mission. And then he ends by saying, and lo, I am with you always, even unto when? The end of the age. That's right. So that is the context in which mission must take place. But then within the text, we find 4 verbal phrases. The first one, of course, you know this well, go, therefore. And then we quickly come to the second one, make disciples of all nations. And then the other 2 verbal phrases, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to observe all things that I have commanded you. Now, I know you're good students of the Bible, and you may know the answer. So I'm curious, which one of these verbal phrases is the heart of the Gospel Commission? You see, actually, there are 4 verbal phrases, but only one is the imperative or the command. The others are present participles. Now, you may wonder, what is that? Well, it just means it's modifying the command. It's adding meaning, just like an adverb would modify a verb. So these others are modifying one of those. Which one do you think is the command? How many of you think go is the command of the Gospel Commission? Now, I got it wrong the first time I did, so that's okay. Anyone here? Okay, thank you. One person. What about make disciples? How many of you think that is the command? See, I know. And I think Hockey may have known this too, but thank you for playing along. Baptizing, teaching, and going are the context of the heart of what we've been asked to do, is make disciples. In fact, the word go can be used euphemistically for live. We should go though, right? So I'm not trying to discount or detract from the idea that we are sent, but it means that wherever we are sent, wherever we go through the Holy Spirit, the focus is on making disciples. How? By baptizing and teaching. That's how. And to be Christ-like is to be a person with a mission, because Christ has a mission. Mission is not an option. Now, you may not be able to be involved in world mission, but you can be involved in local mission to the unreached. So that is the second of God's goal. One is to go to every people group, and the second one is to make disciples. Why? Why is that God's goal? That's kind of a silly question though, isn't it? Of course it's God's goal. We don't need to ask why, just do it. But still, there must be a reason for it, and we're going to take a look at that in our next episode. Because actually, the answer to this question, as obvious as it is, there's more to it, and we want to get the full answer to the question why, and not just a piece of it. Amy, maybe we have some questions you could help us with?
Okay, the favorite time of class, homework time. We have a few discussion questions for you, and for those of you who are viewing this at home, again, we invite you to go to our website, cear.globalmissioncenters.org, download the workbook that goes with this, and you can answer the questions. So for those of you in class, would invite you again to get together in pairs and just discuss these questions. The first question is, do you agree that baptism alone is insufficient for really measuring success? Number 2, how should we measure success in reaching people groups? What ideas do you have for that? Because if we have to measure it, what do we measure? We need to know what we're measuring.
And some practical, how do you count these things?
Right.
How do you measure?
Right. And finally, how do you measure disciples? Some of you had mentioned earlier that no, really, baptisms aren't enough. We need to be measuring discipleship. How do you measure that? What ideas and suggestions would you have? Okay, so we'll take a few minutes now and you can discuss that together.